Smoke signals. Government indicates it will stop e-cigarette sales. Financial Secretary believes Citi's 2018 economic growth was 3%. Running commentary. Thousands take part in Hong Kong Marathon. Hello, good evening. Users of vape pens in Hong Kong may see their habit go up in smoke. The government plans to ban the import and sale of the items by amending the law. Caleb Long has our top story.
You won't have a chance to restock your stash. That's the health chief's message to those who plan to stock up on e-cigarettes or heat-not-burn cigarettes before a bill banning the manufacture, import, sale, distribution and publicity of such products is passed.
We probably cannot entirely stop people from doing that, except by appealing, by doing education. But really, later on, when the law is being enacted and when the import is being banned, by law, then even getting it from internet would have a chance of violating the law.
The health chief is also determined to stop the supply of alternative smoking products on the market. That means she will not extend the 6-month grace period once the Smoking Public Health Amendment Bill is passed.
After the 6 months, in fact, in the first few months, we plan to be less stringent on the enactment and also the enforcement. We really want the law to be enacted as soon as possible. So if we really extend, this period, so that means there will be a delay, in the law enactment.
Chen said the government has no plan to increase the tobacco duty this year. But she believes users of e-cigarettes will not switch to traditional cigarettes after the passage of the amendment bill. The government plans to table the bill in the Legislative Council this Wednesday. Caleb Leung, TVB News.
Medical professionals took to the streets of Mong Kok to protest service overloads at public hospitals. They joined groups including Neo-Democrats and People Power. They brought with them pots, a play on Cantonese slang to say the situation is out of their depths. Participants want the government to reduce the number of one-way permits given to mainlanders settling in Hong Kong. The immigrants are seen as a reason behind the surge in demands at hospitals, with many already operating at full capacity. A pedestrian was killed in Wong Tai Sin after a car slammed into her at around 11 a.m. The car was travelling along Fei Fung Street towards Ming Fung Street when it struck the woman. Paramedics found the victim unconscious when they arrived. The 70-year-old woman was pronounced dead at Kwong Wah Hospital. The driver was arrested for dangerous driving causing death. Police also followed up on a crash in Aberdeen. A car overturned on the Wong Chuk Hang Road flyover after hitting the curb at around 1 p.m. A female passenger sustained light injuries and was taken to hospital. Hong Kong's 2018 economic growth may be just around 3%. That's according to Financial Secretary Paul Chan. Kana Chiu has more.
Paul Chan is almost at the finish line for his latest budget, which will be announced in 10 days' time. The financial secretary said the focus will be on stabilizing the economy, supporting enterprises, and preserving employment. But he also warned of greater external economic uncertainties ahead, such as the China-US trade talks and Brexit negotiations. He elaborated further in his weekly blog post about a visible slowdown in the SAR's economic growth in the fourth quarter of 2018. Excluding price changes, exports in the fourth quarter achieved nearly zero growth. Consumption sentiments were affected too, resulting in just a 2.1% year-on-year growth in retail sales. The figure is far from the more than 12% increase in the first half of the year. Chan also forecast the year-on-year economic growth rate in the fourth quarter to be less than 1.5%. That is significantly slower than the 3.7% average growth recorded in the 3 preceding quarters and the weakest since the first quarter in 2016. He predicts the economic growth in 2018 at roughly 3% at the lower end of the figure range projected in last year's budget. Chan does not rule out the possibility of this year's economic growth being lower than 2.7%. He also called the inclusion of a $2,000 subsidy for students in the upcoming budget simply a rumor. Kana Chu, TVB News.
Sources say Beijing will outline its development plan for the Greater Bay Area by tomorrow at the earliest. The plan will confirm the role and duties of Guangdong Province and Hong Kong and Macau in the region's development. Secretary for Constitutional and Mainland Affairs Patrick Nip stressed the plan simply provides a direction to follow. Governments of Guangdong and the two SARs will need to discuss with Beijing how to implement the plan. A local think tank proposed ways to boost traffic on the underutilized Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau bridge. Representatives from Wisdom Hong Kong played up the benefits of the crossing in stimulating regional integration, particularly in the Greater Bay Area. Besides an insufficient quota for private cars to use the bridge, they say current schemes are complicated. In the long run, they want rules relaxed so Hong Kong drivers can go directly to Guangdong Province, even without a mainland license. Overseas now, German Chancellor Angela Merkel drew lengthy applause for her spirited defense of a multilateral approach to global affairs and support for Europe's decision to stand by a nuclear deal with Iran. Tony Sabine has that story.
The annual Munich Security Conference is where the world's top defense officials, diplomats and politicians come to talk shop about the geopolitical issues facing the global community. Yesterday, German Chancellor Angela Merkel mounted a robust defense of Europe's decision to continue to engage with Iran. She told her audience that she shared American concerns about many Iranian efforts to increase its power in the Middle East. But while she said the split with Washington over Iran's nuclear agreement depressed her very much, she defended it as an important channel to Tehran. But US Vice President Mike Pence, head of America's delegation in Munich, was not impressed. He doubled down on American criticism of Europe while defending the US decision to walk away from the deal.
We've had very frank discussions about the Iran nuclear deal here in Munich and in Poland. We called on our European allies to stop undermining US sanctions against Iran, to join with us in further isolating Iran economically and diplomatically, and to withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal.
In his main speech, Pence chided America's NATO partners for not paying their fair share in defense and urged the world to recognize Juan Guaido as Venezuelan president. He also took aim at China.
Under President Trump's leadership, the United States has also made it clear that China must address the long-standing issues of intellectual property theft, forced technology transfer, and other structural issues in China that have placed a burden on our economy and on economies around the world.
While not addressing Pence directly, Politburo member Yang Jiechi rejected American concerns about Chinese mercantilism. He also dismissed concerns that Chinese telecoms giant Huawei was a spying tool for Beijing. And he poured cold water on any suggestion that China might join an expanded version of the Intermediate-Range Nuclear Forces Treaty between America and Russia that Washington and Moscow have now decided to abandon.
That the United States and Russia will be able to come back to the INF treaty. On the other hand, China develops its capabilities strictly according to its defensive needs and doesn't pose a threat to anybody else. So we are opposed to the multilateralization of INF.
Tony Sabine, TVB News.
US-backed fighters in Syria are poised to capture the Islamic State group's last tiny enclave, bringing an end to its self-declared caliphate. This comes after US President Donald Trump hinted at a victory against the militant group in Syria earlier this month. Peter Koveos has details.
US-backed Syrian Democratic Forces, or SDF, are on the lookout in Baghouz. This area near the border between eastern Syria and Iraq is believed to be the last toehold for Islamic State militants. The most destructive extremist force to terrorize the region in years is on the brink of defeat. A commander with SDF says his team is in the process of clearing out the last area held by Daesh, the Arabic name for ISIS. U.S. President Donald Trump boasted earlier this month of the eventual demise of the militant group.
The United States military, our coalition partners, and the Syrian Democratic Forces have liberated virtually all of the territory previously held by ISIS in Syria and Iraq. It should be formally announced sometime, probably next week, that we will have 100% of the caliphate. But I want to wait for the official word. I don't want to say it too early.
This fighter says the U.S. president didn't liberate the area, but people like him on the ground did. Regardless, Trump tweeted about the success and called it a 100% caliphate victory. Trump also asked that European allies take back the hundreds of ISIS fighters captured and prosecute them. The apparent triumph marks the end of a global campaign to end the extremist group's 4-year hold on the territory in Syria and Iraq. This could also signal the end of America's military involvement in the area. The American leader has sworn he would pull U.S. forces out of the region after the defeat of Islamic State. That decision raises questions about Washington's Kurdish allies and Turkish involvement in northeastern Syria. Turkey regards the SDF's strongest component, the Kurdish YPG, as terrorists and has threatened to march deeper into northern Syria to drive the group back. Peter Koveos, TVB News.
The acting U.S. Secretary of Defense says he has not determined how much money he will redirect to President Trump's border wall. Pat Shanahan, who has been leading the Pentagon since James Mattis stepped down, made the comment to reporters flying with him from Germany to Washington. Shanahan said he has a great deal of discretion in deciding how to use the power granted to him in Trump's declaration of a national emergency. The White House says it expects $6.1 billion from the Pentagon in helping provide for the barrier.
I'll go in and review that analysis now that the emergency has been declared. Based on that, we can do an assessment of what would be appropriate. All of this money has been assigned for other purposes, so it really then comes down to what are you going to trade off? And when you say trade-off, it really is a trade-off. There is, something that wouldn't be done that had planned to be done.
Donald Trump's recommendation for ambassador to the UN has withdrawn her name for consideration. Heather Nauert cited family commitments why she would not accept the position. Critics say a Bloomberg article might be the basis for the decision. The report claims she employed an immigrant nanny who was not allowed to work in the U.S. The president has railed against illegal migration into America. Before working as U.S. State Department spokesperson, Nauert was a host for the conservative Fox News channel. Trump announced in December he would nominate Nauert for the UN position to replace Nikki Haley, who resigned at the end of 2018. Sources say North Korean leader Kim Jong-un will arrive in Vietnam on February 25th, ahead of a planned summit with U.S. President Donald Trump. Trump and Kim are due to meet in Hanoi on February 27th and 28th, following their historic meeting last June in Singapore. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said Washington aims to get as far down the road as we can at the summit. Kim will meet with Vietnamese officials when he arrives in Hanoi before meeting with Trump. And back locally, more than 70,000 runners took to the streets to take part in this year's Hong Kong Marathon. But as Haley Joe reports, not everyone made it to the finish line, as at least 29 participants were taken to hospital.
3, 2, 1!
The action began before 6 o'clock this morning, officiated by Chief Executive Carrie Lam. Altogether, some 74,000 runners took part in events of varying distances, including the full marathon, the half distance, and the 10-kilometer race. Responding to its growing demand, the organizer increased the quota for the full marathon by 4,000 this year. Grabbing the attention of spectators were the runners in funny costumes. Some for fun, others for a cause. even coming from Singapore.
I was attempting a Guinness World Record to run the fastest 21 kilometres